I'm Eric Wallace. Welcome to Pints Perspectives. I'm the co-founder of Left Hand Brewing Company and the CEO. We've been here for 31 and a half years. And we're here tonight to talk about finding common ground within the many dimensions of environmentalism. And we've got some subject matter experts and people with relevant experience here joining us tonight as well. There's going to be a bit of a SOSSAS training. We do this in conjunction with SOSSAS. Many of you here are familiar with SOSSAS. Not all of you are, I'm sure. But that's the School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service that Mike Butler and Carol Enright have put together here with a bunch of other people. And both Jake Spencer and Stephanie Rossi are part of that group. There's others here that are part of that group. Yeah. There's others here that are part of the group. And then we also have with us, and I'll introduce them more deeply as we get into this, Tom Dean from the CSU College of Business, and Sarah Dawn Haynes, who's here. She works at the CU Environmental Center, but she's also chair of the Indian Peaks group of the Sierra Club. So we want to bring some people in that actually have relevant experience to the subject matter. So there's going to be some training about listening, because not everyone in here agrees with everyone else. I'm sure of that. And we're going to try to get better at speaking with one another and understanding. So we're going to talk about resolving conflicting perspectives to further our community's strategic vision. This is a critical dynamic that we need to understand, address, and resolve in order to realize Longmont's full potential and make it attainable for future generations. Affordability, quality of life, economic vitality, and sustainability in the future depend on strong leadership now. This is designed to help people think about issues. It's designed to help local leaders and potential leaders hear what's going on as well, and perhaps contribute and network a little bit. And we've got some candidates in Longmont's next election sitting in the back here. So that's a good thing. There'll be eight of these talks, and then there will be a series of 4 candidate forums here in September and October prior to the election. So this is kind of designed to help engagement and educate everybody and ourselves in our community. Land use and urban design decisions in Colorado are usually within the authority of city officials. Home rule jurisdictions, and I don't want to be too elementary here, but I'm just trying to lay the basis here. Home rule jurisdictions make their own land use decisions, which means the state of Colorado has a limited ability to influence a more comprehensive approach. And the result is a checkerboard of different rules, widespread suburban sprawl, and a large impact on affordability, and not just in housing. The reality has statewide and regional implications on public health, the environment, transportation, water and energy usage, wildlife, agriculture, and economic vitality. And the issues are complex, and shades of gray abound. Black and white simplifications of the inherent conflicts between interest groups are not able to move discourse forward and provide a path for leadership to efficiently take the necessary actions to provide the greatest good to the largest number of residents. And if we're to succeed in leaving a livable Longmont and Colorado to future generations, we need to educate ourselves, and especially our elected officials, about the realities and trade-offs that planning experts already wrestle with every day. We need to improve the level and effectiveness of conversation and debate to arrive at best solutions. That's what we hope to contribute to a little bit here this evening. So now I'm going to introduce Steffi Rossi, and she is going to give us some SOSSAS training without even having to go to SOSSAS training.
Hi guys, how are you? Oh, can you hear me? I would use it.
Yeah.
They're recording? Okay. Okay. So my name is Steffi Rossi, and I was a public school social studies teacher for 40 years. It is the absolutely best job in the world. It is. Teaching adolescents is the coolest job in the world, because They're curious, they're wonderful, they're ornery, they know everything, they know nothing, and they want to learn how to have a conversation in the world. And oftentimes we send people into the world without giving them skills about how to have a conversation. I'm not a believer in not talking about religion and politics, because we should learn how to talk about religion and politics, not run away and hide and, oh, we can't talk about this. Let's learn how to talk and listen to each other. So I've taught active listening. I had to deploy it in my classroom when kids say something that's controversial. My classroom is a safe space. And as a safe space, I wanted everything to be in the room, even when it went, ah! And there were those moments. If you want me to share any, I will be glad to share a story or two, where you have to stop, think about what you're going to say, how you're going to keep the conversation going, and how you're going to keep the presence of mind to keep the people in the conversation. So when you have a student tell you, as students told me throughout my career, because I'm Jewish, that Jesus was going to come and kill me when he found me, what do? No. You honor, you tell them, I really love that you felt safe enough to share something so important to you. And I love that you felt safe to tell that to me. And honey, I know you love me and I love you too. And we're going to continue talking about this topic. And so I want you to think that's my training, because high school kids, they don't have filters. Some don't talk at all. So they throw in everything in the room. And I always want kids to know you're special, you belong in this room, and your thoughts are what you should feel free to share. So when it was political season, I had great conversations with all stripes, because they have to feel safe to express. So keep that in mind. Even when you disagree with someone, how do you create the space to listen to them? And I try to operate with this adage as we go into the training. I don't have to make others wrong in order to be right in my head. Now, my right might be right for me, might not be right for anybody, but I want to create a space where we can have a conversation about possibilities in our listening. Does that make sense? Easier to achieve or harder to achieve than we think? And what do you think gets in the way of our listening? What? Emotion, yes. What else? What? Alcohol. Hopefully that wasn't going on in a high school classroom. But what else gets ego, right? What else gets in our way? Technology. What else? Our thoughts. What I've really noticed in the last probably 15 years is the speed of our thoughts. So we react. We're very reactionary anymore because of our devices. And I don't want to point fingers and blame. It's just it's what's happened. So how do we respond to it? Okay. So those are my entries. And I want you to ask questions. I want you to be involved. I want you to doubt everything I'm saying. I've done this stuff for 40 years listening to adolescents. And I've refined it and refined it and refined it and refined it. And sometimes when people hear it, they think it's oversimplified. It might sound that way initially, but when we have 15, 20 minutes, I've boiled it down to what I believe are the pearls. And if you have any other questions, I will give you my phone number, my email, and we can continue the conversation. Because once I teach someone, I'm your teacher forever. That's just how I function in the world. Thank you. So we're going to begin with active and empathic listening. And we kind of have been involved with the Longmont, SOSSAS that is, the SOSSAS has been involved with the Longmont community for a couple of years, how do you, as an active citizen, talk to your neighbors? How many of you don't even talk to your neighbors? It's like, I just can't do it, okay? How do you enter conversations that you might be afraid of or uncomfortable with? How can we develop the ability? I can see multiple perspectives. It doesn't mean that I have to give them all the same weight, that I give them all the same I agrees, but I can see how people arrive at those conclusions. Is that different than having to discount it? Can I make space for the possibility of people arriving at their conclusions in different ways? I taught history. All history is a story about what people did in different time periods. Think, if you boil it down, what did this guy do? What did this woman do? What did this guy do? Why did they do it? And so that's what history is, a conversation about people making decisions with different information, different time periods, etc. How did they do what they did? And why? Why did they do what they did? Be multidimensional, be empathetic, be open-minded. There are no simple answers. People are gray. That was cool, whatever that was. Was it? It felt like an affirmation. But anyway, people operate in gray dimensions. It's not always black and white, and absolutes are kind of hard sometimes, but we absolutely believe in certain things. So there's that mix, that contradiction that rubs up against what we know. Provide a safe and positive place to engage. I think that's probably the easiest thing to do. I want everybody to feel safe in a conversation. That doesn't mean it might not get a little tense. It might not get a little, and whenever it gets too hot, my go-to line is, tell me how you got there. Tell me how you got there. I need help in understanding how you got there. Then that opens it up rather than shuts it down. Provide a safe, positive place to engage. Emphasize, I'm sorry if I'm blocking anything here. Oh, that's easy to do, huh? Emphasize the importance of building relationships. I engage all the time on Facebook with former students of mine. And one of them was just over at my house the other day, and he was trimming all the trees and getting them ready for the summer. And he said, I never knew what you believed in our classroom. I never knew who you voted for. I go, good, I didn't want you to know. He goes, I thought you voted for everybody. And I thought, that was really good. He goes, I know what you feel now. And I said, well, now I'm not your teacher anymore. But I wanted you to know that everybody's thoughts are in the room. And we built a relationship with him. I still have, his name is Tommy, and he comes out and he does my trees. I like to support young entrepreneurs as they start their careers. Listen to the other side. Listening to the other side without the intention of stomping on them. And sometimes I have to tell myself, okay, Steffi, you've had a conversation with this person before. Get your armor on, because the personal jabs come really fast. And I'm a Star Trek fan, so I always like, shields up, and I just say this in my head, photon torpedoes, if they hit, they will hit the ground. I'm not going to attach to what people say about me. Just because they say it doesn't make it true. Now, all that sounds so easy, that's why you have to practice. Okay, so I'm giving you these tips because we're going to be talking about topics that people have different approaches on within the environment, different ideas, different solutions, and they come from different places. All valuable, all necessary to listen to. How do we create that space? Think deeply about sources of information. I also read for a company, it's called Ad Fontes Media, and we read for bias in newspaper articles. And we watch podcasts, and I read a wide range of materials. And now we're doing international articles too. And it's really taught me how to look for things in an article. What do you think is one of the most indicative pieces of grammar that leads you somewhere? An adjective, exactly. Now, big and tall might be, it is what it is, but creepy, narrow-minded, all those might lead you a whole nother way. So watch how journalists use adjectives, just as something to pay attention to. Realize citizenship is a privilege and a responsibility. We do have a responsibility. I am so committed as a history teacher to helping kids and adults and everybody understand history provides a lot of lessons if we step back into it and take a look that we can bring forward with us. Share your gifts, believe in yourself, take care of yourself in the conversation. If it gets too hot, I need to take a break. Good, let's take a break. But we want you to be in the beginning of the conversation, and we want you in the end of the conversation. So as I begin my training, the little girl that told me that about dying and all that stuff about Jesus, she came up to me a year later and she said, Miss Rossi, are you going to teach that class again about world religions? And I go, oh my gosh, it's like kind of like tiptoeing through a minefield. I don't know if I can do it. And she said, you need to do it. I now understand that people are just as passionate about their faith as I am about mine. And I go, oh, that's what I wanted her to understand. And she'd been shunned by her church for doing that. So in her growth, another door closed, but she was still committed to the idea of understanding. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go forward. Any questions? I sometimes think I talk too fast because I'm a teacher. So if I'm going, woo, just say, slow down. Okay? All right, we begin. Next slide. Components of active listening. How many of you, and I think we all do this, as soon as somebody starts talking, you're preparing how you're going to respond. Yeah. Okay? And I can even see it in my husband's eyes. He's a basketball coach. And I'm like, he's a basketball coach and he's a retired math teacher. He just retired from coaching at Holy Family and he had a great career. And I can tell when he's glazing over. So sometimes I will throw in a term like pivot. Pops him right back into the conversation. And it's not meant as derogatory. I just recognize I could fight with him forever about why you aren't listening. But if I find ways to engage him and he's talking, I said, fast break. There he is. And I said, I need you here with me. I need you here with me. So there's tools we can use to emphasize their talents that they're bringing to the conversation. Does that make sense? So as a teacher, I'm going to ask you to do this periodically. Am I making sense or am I foggy? Okay, making sense? Okay. Prepare. I just shared with you how I prepare to listen. If I'm with somebody I've never met, I try to make eye contact. I tried to walk around and introduce myself to all of you tonight. I wanted you to know I'm here, I'm present, and I'm really glad you're here. I appreciate you taking the time to come out on a Thursday night and spend it with us. Observe verbal and nonverbal messages. You can always tell when it's getting too icky. What do people do? Give me the body language. Because it's just a little scary. And so I always ask, can I touch your arm? Yes. Do you want us to slow down a little bit?
Yes, please.
Okay. So all I've acknowledged, and we just kind of play that around there, all I've acknowledged is the place in that where they're a little uncomfortable, and I don't want to lose them. Bring them back. Make them feel safe. Do you want me to slow down? Am I going too fast? Those are cues that you could also use. Eye rolls are one of my favorites. And then because high school kids do it all the time. Oh God, we got another, and it's the whole head. It's a going. The whole head goes, and you acknowledge. Humor is a really good tool. And I used to say, "Oh, are you complaining about the homework?" And they'd say, "Yeah." And I go, "Well, whatever you do, do it well. Let's hear an A+ complaint." And they go, "Ugh." I go, "That's an F. That's why you're still not doing your homework and you haven't mastered complaining." And so we use the humor, keep them engaged, bring them back to, once they get it out of the way, we can go forward. So you move with people where they are rather than block. Does that make sense? Easier said than done. Yes, practice. And I'm going to say this again. You can call and practice with me anytime you want. Observe hand and eye movements. A lot of things can tell you there's this, or there's this, there's this. Just follow and maybe slow down and tell me what that means. Because it might mean something different to you. Tell me, I saw you roll your eyes. Can you tell me what that means? And there might be embarrassed. And I'm not trying to embarrass you, but I really want to understand you. I want to understand what you're saying to me. Okay? Provide feedback reflecting you are paying attention. Now, I think this idea of reflective listening, have you heard that over and over and over and over and over? You know, how many of you have? Maybe I do because it's in my field. And how many of you see sometimes terms get worn out? And so when you bring it up again, somebody rolls their eyes. So I sometimes say, am I hearing you correctly? I certainly don't want to misunderstand you. I certainly can I check for understanding? Last week, I graded AP essays all week long. We graded like 2.9 million essays last week. And I had to give feedback. My job was to read. I was a table leader. And so I had 11 people reading, and I have to back read their work to make sure they're aligned. So if they're not, I have to give them feedback. Well, teachers anybody gets a little wounded when you're giving them feedback. So I told them I was so honored by the fact that I was allowed to assess their historical understanding because it allowed us to have a historical conversation about what history means. Do you think I had them there? and I could do anything. I would never abuse that, but I opened the door because I was very humbled by the thought that I had to evaluate their work. So I did, and I shared some perspectives with them. And by the end of the week, it was, tell me more. What do you know about this time in history? So we built a relationship. Some of them are still talking with me this week, even though your eyes are still recovering from that experience. But it's the idea, my goal is to listen, not to answer. Observe, and we were Zoom meetings, so what do I observe? You don't hardly even see anybody, but I listened to what they said. Observe hand and eye movements. Can't see that in a Zoom session, but I heard one teacher say this. He said, I'm a grandfather and I just love to give points to the kids. Yeah, I know. And I said, I love how much you love your students. Do you really want to reward them when it's not accurate? He goes, no. He goes, but they work so hard. And I said, I know, but would you reward somebody that worked really hard on your car speaker and it didn't work after 8 hours? Would you go, I just love that you worked hard all day? Or would you want it to work? He goes, I want it to work. I said, so there's a way you can communicate that. You can reward their effort and say, we just need a little bit more to get over the hump. Because kids don't want to be insulted. Adults don't want to be insulted. They want you to be honest with them, but taking care of them in that conversation. Tell me more. How did you get there? Help me understand. And if you need more, those are my 3 go-tos. Tell me more about how you got there. How did you get there? I had a student one year, he pronounced that it was right after Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, and he pronounced to the classroom that he was really glad all the people died. So what did he do there? And what do you think the kids did? And so I knew this kid I wanted to keep him involved in the class. And I said, can you explain to me how you got there? And he goes, not today. And I said, okay. So a couple of days later, we talked some more. By the end of the year, he said, they didn't deserve to die. But had I shut him off in that moment because it was so, I would have lost him forever. And hopefully, it's always my hope that they then go into the world and they create that somewhere else in their lives. They listen to someone else. Next one. Communication skills. I want you to think about what your best communication skills are. Turn and talk to a friend. Share one. What's the best thing you do as a communicator? On your marks, get set, go. Turn and talk. Turn and talk. Turn and talk. Huh? Listening. Okay, back up here. Back up here. Back up here. One more time, back up here. I love how you all said you were good listeners. Okay, how do you know you're a good listener? Because I hear other people. You hear other people. Do they tell you that? You're a good listener. I really like how you focus in on what I said. Do you know? Have they said that to you? Because we usually build our skills based upon what other people have reaffirmed for us. Okay? Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is this particular thing, a positive or negative to you? Things. So it's actually responding to what they're saying.
Okay. All right. What if they say something that just throws you out of your game? Do you have a go-to sentence stems that you can use? How did you get there? Yeah, and before I used a lot of these things, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. That does not work. So again, training how to get, adolescents are so good because you have to train to keep them in the conversation. They're so intimidated anyway. They think I know, most of them thought I was born during the Revolutionary War. So I want to keep them engaged in the conversation, and I have to bring them into it, make it safe to express themselves. Focus fully on the speaker. Look at them. Don't be thinking about what you're going to do next. Okay? Be there, be present. And I think that's another idea. Are you present? That's another term that's been really amped up over the years. So be present. Be there in the conversation. Focus to understand the speaker, not correct the speaker. Focus to understand the speaker and listen more to the speaker. Different than passive hearing. Sometimes passive hearing has been labeled as the Me Too hearing. I'm ready to me too their story because I got one that's going to beat what they just told me. Okay? And it's usually because that's all people know how to have a conversation. They don't know that maybe it's an exchange. Remember earlier I said people don't know how to talk about topics, so they revert to telling you about themselves. So again, teaching people how to be active listeners, how to be active participants in a conversation. No preparing a response. That's the hardest thing we have to do, because that's our ticket into this space. So you have to prepare to ask questions. And I want you tonight to think of asking 3 questions before you come to a conclusion. 3 questions before you come to a conclusion. Does that mean I'm done? How many of you can tell I'm engaged in what I do? How do you know? What are the clues? Enthusiasm. What else do I do? Eye contact. What else do I do? I move around. Yeah, teachers move around. But I tell you stories. Do you know how stories bring people into a room quicker than anything else? And I use shock effect stories because it always works, okay? Because it gets people into the space. And the reason I use those stories is to show you that you can get through those and you can still have a relationship with people after the fact. It can be done. Behavior and responses show you are listening. And if you drift, I have a friend, she's so very smart. I get 1 sentence, she gets 50. And sometimes I just say, I need a break. And I've prepared that when I go see her, it's going to be the lecture series. And there's a lot of reasons why she does that. And I've just accepted that's what it is. But her stories are so fascinating, I kind of get to really enjoy the knowledge she shares with me. That's preparing for who I'm talking to, preparing for keeping this in the conversation, and recognizing what someone is and what someone is not. Does that make sense? Thumbs up? You still with me? Am I overwhelming you? Okay. Close, okay. Let me know when I go over the edge. Okay. Follow-up questions demonstrate your investment in the conversation. Follow up, ask more, inquire more. What do you want to know? That means you're present as well. Okay, next one. Listen with purpose. Do not form your response, but listen. Ask more questions. Clarify what you do not understand. Do not me too the story with your own experiences. Just listen and be present with the person. Pay attention and focus. You will see that I'm telling you these things in multiple ways, multiple times. You know how many times you have to usually hear something before you hear it? Oh, 7. Wow. I was thinking it was 3. And I'm hoping it's 3 tonight. I was thinking adolescents might need 7, but 3, yes. Pay attention and focus. Next. Listen with intention. My intention tonight was to bring you into the space of it's possible to have difficult conversations and listen with purpose. It's possible to have conversations that might even make me a little bit uncomfortable, but there's a purpose. It's possible to have conversations about with someone I might totally disagree, but there is a purpose to understanding. That was my intention tonight. To learn. I want to learn more and more and more and more. There's that great Don Henley song, the older I get, the less I know. Something to that. It's horrible. I've quoted him horribly, but I've always thought that was so interesting. And I love the comparison to adolescents who think they know everything. And by the time I get to my age, I realize how little I actually know. And how that's okay. To summarize a conversation with someone. Suspend your urge to respond. Have a sense when the person is done. Work towards an exit of a conversation that's too long. I haven't achieved that with my friend that does 1 to 50. I don't know how to do it. I'm really stuck on that one. I've asked other friends that are supposed to be with us at these luncheons to come because I need some help. And we all struggle with what to do. We're kind of stuck in this one, and we don't know what to do. I've tried different tactics, and nothing is working. But the friendship is still there. That's the most important part. Summarize what you heard. And at the end of a really important conversation, if somebody's asking you something or directing you to do something, I want to close with 3 things. You want me to do this? You want me to do this? You want me to do this? Or I understand you to say this or this or this. Close with that reflective understanding. So if you've missed anything or you've misinterpreted, it's been clarified. And that tells the person what they said matters again. Ask the person if they are finished, then share your perspective. This is one of the hardest things to do because you get amped, you're going. Okay? Sit calmly, listen, be present. And if you need a moment, say that again. I didn't quite hear that. There's all these little phrases you can do that are not offensive. Next. Involves the whole body. Face them, maintain eye contact. Now, people like personal space. Do you remember that Seinfeld show where that guy was a close talker? Yeah. And I love that. There's a dated issue here. Some people don't know Seinfeld. And you want to respect the space that people are talking with. Full attention, no distractions, put away devices, do not disrupt conversation with looking at device. That's a hard thing, and I think it's very interesting. Adults say kids do that all the time, so do adults. Everybody has got that phone thing going on in one degree or another. So it's something that we just have to integrate and think about how to put it aside. Set some ground rules. I had a rule in our household when my kids were growing up and they had to tell me something hard. Do you want me to listen to you as a friend or do you want me to listen to you as your mother? I need to know the ground rules. Can I ask 20 questions or can I ask 5? And so once the ground rules are aware, you're both, and you need to communicate them out loud. Once they're in the room, people know how to operate. So you're having a tough conversation, put some ground rules around it so you don't misunderstand or misinterpret or go down a road that you're not ready to. And if it happens, if somebody tells you something that's just so shocking, I'm trying to think of one thing my kid told me. Oh, I remember when one of my daughters came to me and said, Mom, I'm going to go down to Planned Parenthood and get on birth control. And I went and took a shower. I just walked away and went and stood in the shower. And she came in and she said, I handled it so poorly. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I don't know what to say, so I'm taking a shower. It didn't make sense. I got out and I said, I still don't know what to say. And all I was admitting is I didn't know how to talk about it. And that's okay. You can come back 24 hours later, but don't go take a shower. Tell them, first off, that I don't know what to say. I don't have an answer for this. Another time, we went away for a weekend, and one of my daughters decided she was going to drink something in the house. And the rule was, you can't drink anything in the house unless we're here. And I got home, and there was a bottle cap on the counter. And I saw it, and I picked it up, and I said, what's the rule? And she said what the rule was. And I said, and you chose to break it? And she said, yes. And I said, just what's going to be the consequences? I said, I don't know. You broke the rule. You come up with a consequence. And you have 24 hours. She came back to me in 24 hours and told me what she wanted us to do. She wanted us to go away again, and she wouldn't drink this time. And I said, that's a really good idea. I like that, but you're going to pay for our weekend. And she did. Now, I don't know if she drank different alcohol the second round. The point was, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to handle it. It was her choice to break the rule. She needs to come up with a consequence. And we still had a conversation about it. Ground rules, listening only, ask for permission to inquire. Pregnant pauses are one of my favorites. If you don't, and you saw my pregnant pause led me to a shower. But you need to communicate what it is. I don't know what to say. I don't have any response, and I don't want to say anything I would regret. I'm going to take a pause. Can we come back in about a half an hour? Can we come back tomorrow? I really need to think this one through. You're being respectful to yourself and to them in the conversation. And I don't know enough about this to comment on it. I need to do some research. I need to read a little bit more. You create that understanding with each other. You can have a pregnant pause just for a few seconds. Give me 30 seconds. I need to process this. And it's just, but tell them, don't just go take a shower. Regulate your emotions. That's something I had to work on. When I was a teenager, I was all over the place. I think teenagehood is supposed to be all over the place. It's part of the regulation zone where you're learning how to balance it and you get to the other side of it and you understand some of the journey. But even if you're engaged in a hot conversation with people about tough topics, check yourself. If you're getting escalated, take a step back. You don't have to be wound up. And if you want to get wound up, prepare to deal with what's going to come with it. I don't want to be wound up. It's too expensive. I call it emotionally expensive. I just don't want to invest in that kind of stuff, but I want to engage in really heartfelt, deep conversations. Listen to be aware of different cultural norms. I think that's really important. I think it's all right to ask. I had a lot of children, Navajo, the Dene people, and it wasn't culturally appropriate for them to look me in the eye. That was disrespectful. And I didn't I asked somebody, and they told me, and so that was this, and it was a sign of respect. Ask what cultural expectations or what cultural norms, and you can just say something as easy as, you come from a different place, are there different rules about how you have a conversation with each other? And you tell them, I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to grow from it. Next. These are some of the sentence stems you can work on. Paraphrase, communicate what you heard in your own words back to them. Clarify, if you do not understand, ensure by asking more questions. Summarize, increases the understanding and really reflects back to the person you've just engaged with that you were there, you were present in the conversation. Stay focused on the message, repeat, remind, reinforce. Did you hear me repeat? How many times did I repeat? 7. Awesome. Way to go. 7. Remind and reinforce. You guys did a really good job of paying attention. And you're very present. I can see your eyes. You're looking up. I didn't see anybody doing this, the phones. I really appreciate that. I am grateful for your listening skills you reflected back to me. Instead of offering judgment, ask more questions. Hardest thing to do. Because when somebody says something to you that's just horrible, take a breath, tell me how you got there. And maybe you won't like their answer either, but keep the conversation going. And sometimes there'll be a conversation that it just doesn't work. I think we need to own that too, even when we try. Sometimes it just doesn't work. I don't wish them any ill will, but I just can't continue doing this. And that's just, sometimes that happens. Observe nonverbal. We've talked about eyes and posture. I talk with my hands a lot. Next. Are we we've said these things a million times right now, right? We're close? Okay. Knowledge of topic, assumptions. Don't bring your assumptions. Different meaning in words. Clarify words that you might think mean something else. Memory, retaining information. If you don't remember, say so. I don't remember. Help me understand it more. Help me remember. Enthusiasm. I love enthusiasm. I love to tell stories, and I love to pop around a room and get people involved. Ask, what kind of listener do you want me to be today? Do you want me to be a mom, or do you want me to be a friend? Do you want me to be a parent, or do you want me to be a good friend? Next one. Benefits. Builds trust and connection, leads to friendship, and leads to understanding. Creates stronger relationships. Helps prevent and resolve conflict. Helps guard against misinterpretation. And if you misinterpret something, say so. I really got that wrong. I need to go over it again. Enables you to identify problems. Prevents missing important information. Models to others how we can listen to each other. We can do this. I believe it. I've seen it happen again and again and again. Next. Before I turn it over, any questions? Yes.
What do you do with people who use anger as part of their skill set?
First thing I do is ask them, are you really angry about this topic? Because I want them to know that that's what I'm picking up. Are you really angry about this topic? Yes or no? Do you think you can still talk about it without projecting the anger towards me? If they don't think they can, then can we table this for another day? Because I can't keep getting the bullets. It hurts too much. And all you've taken care of them, and you've taken care of you, and you've even offered them another opportunity to begin the conversation again. And you might even say, please call me back when you think you've, worked on some of it. And so I have friends that I've been friends with a long time that sometimes I just call them on it. You're being snarky. I'm not going to talk to you to calm down. But I've known this person for 50 years. So I have some privilege there that I use. And yes, you're welcome. Great question. Anybody else? Yes.
After you spend about 80 years developing an adrenaline-infused emotion response, how do you change that emotional response? Which I believe everything you've said, but you have the emotional response at the beginning. You dug yourself in.
The only way I can, answer that is through another story. And it has to do with, I use my Jewish stories all the time because those were the most profound lessons I've ever learned in my life. When I was 9, my classmates turned around and told me that Jesus was going to come back and he was going to kill me. So I went into hiding. I wasn't going to let anybody find me. I didn't even know who Jesus was. And I was going to hide because I didn't want to be found. And that happened throughout my high school, throughout teaching, all my entire career. I've had episodes of that. So I stepped back from it. I wouldn't even tell people I was Jewish till I was 35. If they found out, I was like, oh, let's talk about something else. I pivoted. So I do believe there are forces at play sometimes that help us learn. I've seen it happen in my classroom. So I stepped back and I went like this. I put them all in place. And I said, oh, the larger lesson was that people can be in so much pain that they have to project it onto me, that I feel excluded. So I never want any of my students to ever feel that in my classroom. So the grace of the pain was my lesson. Does that make sense? I had to be willing to acknowledge that just because people believe that, it didn't mean it was true. And I'd invested a lot of emotional energy in hiding. And if I continued hiding, then I didn't learn the larger lesson. There's an affirmation. Did you hear that? Does that make sense? And the other part is, I might be emotionally invested, but I'm also emotionally invested in connecting to you as a human being. And if all I'm is invested in that emotional having to be right or having to stomp on somebody, then I'm not keeping you here with me. Does that make sense? I don't know if I gave you an answer, but I hope I gave you something to think about. Thank you.
Thanks, Steffi. I don't get tired of hearing her stories. That's a hard act to follow, and I'm not Mike Butler, and I'm not Carol. So, but I'm going to do my best. I'm going to introduce our two panelists here. So, basically tell you who they really are, why they're in the room, and then we're going to move on to where we're going to go from the training, and we're going to go to the issue. And that issue is different ends of the environmental spectrum. And is it really a spectrum, or should it be a spectrum? Or is that the best way for us to find consensus? So we're going to try to listen and find that common ground. And it's kind of a weird mix of what we're trying to do here. But that's what we're trying. And we're going to see if it works. All right, so we got Tom Dean here, is the Timberg Business for a Better World University professor at Colorado State University. He teaches business strategy, entrepreneurship, and sustainable enterprise. He's a pioneer in the field of environmental entrepreneurship. He authored the first known environmental entrepreneurship course in 2001, won accolades for his rigorous theoretical examination of environmental entrepreneurship in 2007, and published the first textbook on sustainable venturing in 2013. His research, teaching, and consulting focus on business strategy, entrepreneurship, and economic opportunities present in emerging social and environmental trends. So, multidisciplinary. Professor Dean also led nationally regarded top-ranked entrepreneurship and sustainable enterprise programs at the University of Tennessee, University of Colorado, CSU, and includes a third place national ranking in social entrepreneurship for CSU's MBA program. Should I continue? Is that enough? You guys convinced that he knows what he's here for? All right, I got a whole another half a page. So, but that's okay. Good. All right, we've established his credibility. That's really the whole thing we're trying to do here. All right, sitting next to Tom, we have Sarah Dawn Haynes. Sarah Dawn grew up in Bailey. She moved to Boulder in 2002 to pursue an environmental studies and geography degree at CU Boulder. She was hired full-time by the CU Environmental Center in 2009. And over the years, she's worn many hats, producing events like the Regional Bioneers Conferences and supporting stadium and festival-sized zero waste events. Her current role is focused on supporting students from every major, I should have put a comma there, stepping into leadership across campus and student projects, class assignments, senior thesis projects, and interns on a variety of sustainability topics. As well, she manages the sustainability, innovation, and leadership workshops and micro-credentials for applied learning and professional development. And I'm going to cut to the chase on some of this as well. She works in the CU Environmental Center, and she's working on her master's in media and public engagement. And her research interests, and this is kind of the interesting part and where it kind of aligns with what we're doing today, includes the nexus of futures literacy through creating artifacts from the future. Think about that. It's oxymoronic in some ways. It's an interesting concept. As a media form to express hope and growing a vision for restoring our relations to each other and the planet. Outside of work, she loves training crew leaders, cooking for wildland restoration volunteers, leading trail projects, and tonight she's here in her capacity as the chair of the executive committee of the local Sierra Club, the Indian Peaks Group. So, welcome to our two panelists. Now, they didn't know what they were really getting into, but there's going to be a couple of questions that we're going to fire off at them. They know what the questions are. After we watch this video, and this video is really bringing an issue that we're then going to practice our skills on. And they'll be wandering around the room. We're going to break into groups. We'll talk for a bit afterwards, and then we'll come back and kind of report back. You've been through these kind of exercises before, I know. So get ready. The issue really is save the neighborhood or save the planet, and how do we resolve these two different aspects of environmentalism? And it can't really be an either-or discussion. So the video we're going to watch lays out the differences of the two ends of the argument. And rather than using gridlock and political and judicial systems to fight things out, our goal is to try to open the way to conversations that can move us forward and get into the future successfully while mindful of the greater good. Because otherwise we just get caught up in trying to be right. We're all trying to be right all the time. And that gets in the way of progress. So we want to keep our minds open. How can we constructively engage? And what can we do then? If we can engage, what can we do locally and regionally to find areas of consensus and lead the way? I think Longmont is a very special place and blessed with a lot of things that most of our other neighbors don't have. Great planning, infrastructure, water, etc. And those were all set in place by those who came before us. But we should be asking ourselves, not what's good for me right now, what will we be leaving to our grandchildren? What will we take advantage of our collective inheritance and show the rest of Colorado and beyond how to do it wisely and sustainably and lead from here? We shouldn't be following and we shouldn't be stagnant. We should be leading. So now we're going to move on to the video. It's a 20-minute video. It's interesting. It's a bit simplistic, but it clearly kind of lays out the two ends. And for me, it was quite eye-opening to understand the history. It actually helped me understand kind of what Steffi was talking about. So enjoy, and I'll be back soon.
Environmentalists are deeply and bitterly divided into two camps, the Greens and the Grays, and they are constantly fighting with each other.
The plan would represent loss of green space.
Tree loss.
Our green space. I have to speak for the trees.
These are the green environmentalists. They're fighting to save the trees and to stop housing and density from destroying the green space in our cities and suburbs. And then
we need more housing.
Per person emissions in a multiplex are lower.
Sustainability is not just maximizing the color green.
This is a good move for the environment.
These are the gray environmentalists. They're fighting for new buildings and denser housing to stop sprawl from destroying natural areas beyond the city. At the local level in Minneapolis, you have environmental organizations like the local Sierra Club butting heads with the local Audubon Society. Both proclaim to be environmentalists, yet they are diametrically opposed on the exact same issue, with the Sierra Club supporting increased housing density and the local Audubon Society suing the city over the exact same thing. So what's going on? Why is housing tearing them apart? And who's right? In the 1950s, suburbs were exploding. Every day, thousands of new homes were built, and people celebrated this growth.
No matter how you add it up, California is enjoying record prosperity.
Compared to the death and destruction of the two wars preceding it, and with the Great Depression still a recent memory, this growth felt like a miracle. Every family had a home, every house had a TV, every child had a pony. For many, it seemed like there was no limit to this era of prosperity. But there were some downsides to that rapid growth. Suburbs were spreading quickly. Across the nation, 3,000 acres of land was converted into suburbs every day. That's the size of about 35 San Franciscos per year that we paved over for more sprawl. Activist Jane Jacobs described whole counties of rolling land being swallowed in repetitive suburbia. Each day, the bulldozers munch farther outward from the cities. These catastrophes sparked the rise of the environmental movement. Conservation groups like the Sierra Club joined forces to take on rampant deforestation, sprawling development, and industrial pollution. Joni Mitchell really captured the whole vibe here, weaving together pollution,
Hey, farmer, farmer, put away that DDT now.
and sprawl.
They paved paradise, put up a parking lot.
Activists rallied together, banning DDT, saving the redwood forests, cleaning up the Hudson River. But for those deep in the environmental movement, there was a realization that the fundamental source of all of these ills was humankind itself, in that more people meant more destruction of the earth. The population question is inseparable from conservation. But that population topic wasn't really a popular one. It didn't get mainstream attention until 1970, which is when the book, The Population Bomb, captivated the nation.
There's 3.6 billion people in the world today, and we're adding about 70 million a year, and that's too many.
The book made its way into living rooms, landing on the Johnny Carson show multiple times. It's hard to overstate just how much it captured people's imaginations. Its message was terrifying.
We can no longer afford merely to treat the symptoms of the cancer of population growth. The cancer itself must be cut out.
The mainstream battle now wasn't just about pollution and sprawl anymore. It was against the unchecked spread of humanity itself. And overpopulation became a radical new rallying cry for a movement seeking to save the planet.
When you go back into the Sierra Club archive, they're talking about overpopulation as something that needs to be addressed at the level of the United Nations. But then they are also talking about how do we get our local chapters engaged in this issue. One way that that case is made is by saying there are ways that we can fight overpopulation in our own backyards. And then those bulldozers that are in your backyard start to take on a kind of new and deeper meaning to you. It's not just, oh, I don't want more neighbors. It's not just, oh, I can't deal with the noise or the traffic. It's that these bulldozers represent something that is really sick about our society.
These environmentalists saw rolling hills transformed into a panorama of skyscrapers. They saw grassy pastures covered with miles of highways. They saw blue skies blotted out by smog. To them, there was no starker image of overpopulation heralding the downfall of nature than this. So environmentalism morphed into a movement that sought to block construction and local development, even within cities, all in the name of halting what they saw as the looming catastrophe of overpopulation. The same people who once celebrated population growth and economic prosperity a decade before were now doing everything that they could to stop it, to protect their corner of the world from the very expansion that had once seemed like a dream come true.
Join us at 11.
Pieces of office equipment.
Contact the Sierra Club today and learn how to help. Your kids are counting on you.
Now, by the time we get to the 90s, environmental groups like the Sierra Club were starting to abandon their anti-population growth positions. Blocking development projects locally didn't really have the desired effect of stopping population growth. It just displaced that growth. Those places to live just got pushed elsewhere.
We should take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else!
But as our understanding of the environment changed, so too did our priorities.
We simply must halt global warming.
In the 90s, you start to see this focus on climate change as being maybe the overriding environmental issue of our time. Every environmental organization, in every aspect of their work, they now ask themselves, how will this affect climate change?
The focus shifted to how to do the least harm with the population that did exist, to minimize environmental impact on a per-person basis. And to do that, they turned towards density. Building up and not out became the new strategy. And this was a complete 180 from previous strategies. This wasn't about stopping population growth anymore. It was about making sure that the growth that did happen did the least damage possible. I'm gonna take a quick detour here to tell you about Hiro Onoda. I promise you it'll be related. In the last few months of World War II, Japanese Lieutenant Hiro Onoda was stationed on a small island in the Philippines. When US forces attacked, Onoda went into hiding, and soon after, the war ended. But when Onoda received leaflets announcing the end of the war, he denied it, thinking it was merely enemy propaganda. For nearly 30 years, he stayed hidden on that island, surviving on coconuts and the occasional stolen cow. All the while, he believed his mission was still active. In his mind, the war had never ended. For many people steeped in the activism of the 1970s, environmentalism was fighting the good fight against private developers and opposing any new construction. So when many environmental groups shifted focus in the 90s and 2000s, embracing urban density, they couldn't believe it. They still see themselves as the true environmentalists, opposing density, standing up against developers. But now, the movement that they once belonged to is saying that they're the bad guys, calling them names like NIMBY. NIMBY. Just as Onoda kept fighting the US in the name of Imperial Japan, well after the rest of Japan had made peace with the US, the Greens are still fighting urban density in the name of environmentalism, well after the rest of environmentalists have made peace with urban density. This shift in priorities created a deep schism in the environmentalist movement. One side views urban density as inherently destructive to the environment, whereas the other views it as essential to its salvation. So who's right? Well, both are kinda, it really depends on what you mean by the environment. There's the environment that refers to things like the ozone layer, climate change, ocean acidification, coral reef bleaching, rising sea levels, greenhouse gas emissions. Basically, the global environment. These are not things you really see on a day-to-day basis. This is what the gray environmentalists focus on. It's more about averting global catastrophes. And then there's the environment that refers to things you do see in your neighborhood. Are there trees on my block? Am I breathing smog? Is that apartment blocking my sunlight? This is what the green environmentalists focus on. It's more about maintaining the environment you live in, the vibes of the neighborhood, and your local quality of life. Like the environmentalists of the 1970s, they want to preserve the nature that they see around them, and they do so by opposing local development and mandating low-density housing patterns. To them, protecting their neighborhood is protecting the environment. And if they can do that, well, then mission accomplished.
So what do you do to protect the environment in cases like this?
The ship was towed outside the environment.
Into another environment?
No, it's been towed beyond the environment. It's not in the environment.
And if they do reflect on the global environment, they look at maps like this and they see terrible patterns stemming from cities. The red, basically where the major cities are, have the highest total emissions. And it sends a pretty clear message. Cities bad, countryside good. But it's not so simple. So let's first look at what the Greens get right, and then at what they get wrong. So for what they get right, whether it's sunlight, trees, stormwater, heat islands, the local environment and local quality of life does matter. For example, too much asphalt produces a heat island effect. This is a NASA map of urban heat islands, places where there's so much asphalt that the temperature can be 7 degrees hotter than surrounding areas. They also care deeply about trees and biophilic design, and this can do a ton for the local environment and how livable your city is. Tree-lined streets can be 5 to 15 degrees cooler, nearly eliminating that heat island effect. Living among nature has been shown to reduce stress, and cars drive much more safely on streets that are canopied with trees. A single mature tree can absorb about half an inch of water from every rainfall, and that can be as much as 100 gallons of water per tree. They also pay for themselves. In Portland, a study showed that the presence of healthy street trees adds $15 million to annual property tax revenues, while only costing about $1.3 million per year for the city to maintain. That's a payoff of nearly 12 to 1. It's a pretty good investment.
If the city planners have their way and create more density, we are faced with grave pollution.
Now we're gonna take a look at what the Greens get wrong. So here's the thing, if we don't densify, we multiply, which is to say that if we don't allow urban centers to grow denser, then all the people who would have lived there instead move farther out and contribute to even more sprawl, thereby multiplying their negative environmental impacts. So let's focus in on 3 key areas: carbon emissions, asphalt, and deforestation. Let's look again at that map of carbon emissions. If we look at it instead on a per person basis, the colors totally flip. Dense cities have far lower carbon footprints per person. And from this perspective, despite all of its gray, New York City is one of the greenest cities in America. It's kind of funny because living in New York City doesn't really feel like living in harmony with nature, but in many ways, it is green. The average New Yorker consumes roughly 1/3 of the electricity of the average Dallas resident, and ultimately generates less than 1/3 of the greenhouse gases of the average American. So why is that? Well, for one, with denser populations, there's more use of mass transit, walking, biking, and there's less car ownership and trips, which cuts pollution and reduces carbon emissions. Apartments also tend to be more energy efficient with shared walls, which reduce the need for heating and cooling, and thereby reduce emissions. To make up for the difference in carbon emissions between the families in one apartment building versus one suburban subdivision, you would need to plant over 49,000 mature trees. Next, we have asphalt. Denser cities actually have less asphalt per person when compared to the suburbs. The sprawling suburbs of New Jersey have 3 times the amount of asphalt per person as nearby cities like Hoboken and Jersey City. For that reason, even the EPA says higher density development is a better way to protect water resources like rivers and lakes and streams, noting that higher density development produces less runoff and less impervious cover than low density development. Here's another way to think of this. Here are 2 ways to build 100 homes on an island. When we build 100 single-family houses, we end up with way more asphalt and way more impervious surface than what we get with 100 apartment units. And that brings us to our next topic. Trees.
Trees.
Trees. Trees. Trees.
With the apartment building, sure, there's less green in that exact area, but you leave the rest of the island untouched. Nature in its wilderness. When you build the 100 houses on their own private lots, you take up way more of the island, clear-cutting way more trees. But let's say the island looks a little more like this, and there's a proposal to build an apartment right here. Yes, it does mean that we lose some trees on that exact lot, but it saves way more trees elsewhere. So while it looks eco-unfriendly to take out those trees for an apartment, the environmental implications would have been far worse if we hadn't. So let's say instead we didn't build that apartment. The people who would have lived there don't just disappear. Instead, they move farther and farther out, pushing into wetlands, forests, and conservation areas. Suddenly, we we need to widen the highways and lay down more roads, and we just dramatically increase traffic and carbon emissions. So when you look at the big picture, cutting down a few trees for denser housing can save the environment from a much worse fate. The key thing that the Greens get wrong when they block density for reasons of environmental impact, whether that be to reduce asphalt or carbon emissions, energy usage, deforestation, habitat destruction, whatever else, they don't actually prevent that impact from happening. They do prevent it from happening in their hyper-local area, sure, but it inevitably gets displaced to be somewhere else. And all that asphalt, carbon emissions, deforestation gets multiplied when our cities can't be densified. So we want trees, we want a high quality of life, and for the sake of our global environment, we also want to minimize suburban sprawl. Can we do all of that? Well, there are a ton of examples of density gone wrong, but there are also ways to do it right. Since 2006, Austin has not only grown its population by well over 200,000 people, it's also increased its tree canopy by a third. This study actually found that within cities, there wasn't really much of a relationship between density and tree canopy at all. Here's an area of San Francisco with low density and low tree cover versus an area with much higher density and also much higher tree cover. And there are plenty of cities all over the world that have increased their density and maintained or grown their tree canopy. There's Curitiba, Brazil, and Barcelona. There's Vancouver, and then there's Singapore. Many of these places also sit near the top of quality of life rankings. As the authors of the tree canopy paper wrote, an urban world that is both green and dense is possible if we choose to do it. Let's break this down. The Greens and the Grays have different objectives or different goals and different strategies to achieve those goals. The Grays' main objective is averting global climate catastrophe, and their strategy to do that is through high density living. The Greens' main objective is local quality of life, and their strategy to do that is through low density housing patterns. And to be super clear, the Grays aren't forcing people to live in high density housing. It's simply allowing the option for people to do so. But in contrast, the Greens are banning high-density housing options, effectively forcing people to live at a lower density than they would have otherwise chosen. We can't do both strategies. Banning high density and allowing high density in the same area is clearly incompatible. So we have to choose one. So what strategy do we choose? Now, we know it's possible to allow high-density housing and achieve a high local quality of life. So that means that the Greens' objective is compatible with the Grays' strategy. But it's not possible to ban high density and preserve the global environment. If all of humanity lived like we do in low-density sprawl, then a global climate catastrophe would be all but inevitable.
An essential strategy for reducing urban-related carbon emissions is supporting dense mixed-use communities.
Ultimately, there are completely understandable lifestyle reasons to oppose density in your city, but you cannot in good faith oppose density on the basis of environmentalism. You cannot in good faith oppose density on the basis of environmentalism. It doesn't really matter how many trees you have on your street if the entire world is burning. So the Greens have to get on board with the strategy of permitting higher density, and the Grays have to cooperate with the Greens in ensuring that this doesn't negatively impact our local quality of life. Here's the kind of depressing part. 3 in 4 Americans believe it's better for the environment if houses are spaced further apart. It probably stems from the feeling that this seems more environmental than this. But it's the exact wrong idea. The Greens have been very successful at blocking upzoning and additional housing using the very environmental laws from the 1970s to sue the projects and policies that they don't like into oblivion.
Plans to grow and restructure the city of Minneapolis are on pause after the demands from a 2018 lawsuit on environmental transparency were granted.
When presented with some proposal to build new housing, the Greens always ask, what are the environmental impacts of building housing here? But they never ask, what are the environmental impacts of not building housing here? And the latter almost always exceeds the former. Blocking density is almost always more destructive than permitting it. We are literally missing the global forests for the local trees. When I ran for city council last year, the local Sierra Club ended up endorsing my campaign, in part because of my stance on housing. And then because of that, some green environmentalists said, oh, the Sierra Club isn't really pro-environment anymore. That local Sierra Club also came out in favor of upzoning and increased density in Arlington County, Virginia, and some long-standing members actually fought that stance and appealed to the National Club and then lost. And consequently, they ended up revoking their membership in protest and calling the leadership in the Sierra Club greenwashing political hacks.
There's complete disregard of the environmental impacts of the radical upzoning.
You will be creating heat domes,
further degradation of our environment,
more greenhouse gases,
increased carbon emissions,
adding a great deal of cement,
environmentally destructive density,
Godzilla stomping around and destroying homes and trees.
We live amidst a rapidly escalating climate crisis. Sacrificing our tree canopy in order to gain more housing options is not in the public interest.
All right, there's some food for thought. Come on up, Tom. And we've got a couple of questions, but first, Steffi, where'd you go? Oh, there you go. This is your last slide that I moved on you, which is why you were looking for it earlier. But I think this is your last slide. Is it?
Sure.
Please lead us through this last slide.
Sure. So you saw the video is great. I really learned a lot, and you saw the different conversations about being green, correct? So we think in terms of future possibilities rather than the current or past problems. We each work to unify and harmonize our comments with those spoken by others. And you can use the term harmonize as the ideal, or it can use it as the beginning of possibilities. Does that make sense? It's hard to believe in harmony when you see oppositional ideas. So think of it as maybe an end goal. But in order to get in that conversation, we have to harmonize the existence of different ways of looking at things. Does that make sense? Okay. We talk in the context of applied spectrums, continuums, and nuances rather than right or wrong. This is hard, try not to get boxed into either ors and create the space for possibilities. Wrong, good, bad, conservative, liberal, Democrat, libertarian, Republican, whatever it is. Those are terms that box us in immediately, and we don't have a lot of movement once we do that. So think of, those are terms that describe some things, but we're going to keep them at bay. And if you feel them coming on and taking over, call and I will perform an exorcism. We start off our conversations by acknowledging the gifts of others. The knowledge and gifts that each one of you bring to a conversation are worthy of listening to. Please create the space for that to happen. Thank you.
And she's here to provide more help once we break into the groups. But first, can you click to the next slide? There's a couple of questions. Oh, sorry, there's one more here. I'll let you all read that. This is totally Mike and Carol, isn't it? Those of you that know. Trying to set the baseline. All right. Click on. We've got two questions, but first, before I force you to talk about this, I just want to get your reaction from your perspectives on that video, because you know where we're going. We're trying to actually, this is the trickiest part, I think, is how do we actually find the consensus, and how do we move forward through our elected leaders and actually make progress. So I'm going to let the Sierra Club, since they were all over this video, I'm going to let Sarah Dawn go first.
How much time for this first question? Do we have?
The first question is just your reaction. Yeah.
Do you want me to take?
Oh, well, please don't take more than 5 minutes.
Hello. So this is such an interesting moment because one of the things left out of my bio is that I've also worked on housing issues long before I was involved with the Sierra Club. And I didn't think the Sierra Club was for me as a longtime environmentalist. Because a lot of the folks who had been a part of it didn't share a lot of my values. And at one point, they were my mentors, they were my teachers. And then when I started to learn about some other, beyond just environmentalism, but sociology, geopolitics, learning more about climate justice, and I felt betrayed. I'm definitely one of the generations who was told not to have kids because it was bad for the environment. And, sorry, Mom. And and I did, I've made my life about sustainability. And then I lived in a co-op, and that was illegal. And, we were going to ruin the neighborhood. And then I tried to fight for occupancy limits to increase, like, allowing a person per bedroom +1. And that took 10 years. And then working on ADUs and really hoping for places for people to age in place, which is really important for the Front Range and our members. But I just kept getting told, no, not like that. Like, be an environmentalist, but no, not like that. And so this is all really deeply personal. And I have found myself in all these conversations. So I just also want to acknowledge how appreciative I am that you're all here. I know that there's a lot of knowledge, lived experiences, and expertise in this room on all kinds of topics, not just what Tom and I know and understand and have to share. So I feel really honored to be here and to share. I think the juxtaposition, just to show, like, I'm both green and gray environmentalist and trying to find the path forward for the county. While I live in Boulder, loved ones, family live here, and so it's really a county-wide question about how we do this. And one of the things that I think about with my research in futures literacy is the capability of thinking about the future. And what I've found working with students over the last 20 years is that, and others and myself, is that we have atrophied our imagination. Hollywood has colonized our imagination around futures, climate futures. There's a lot to be worried about. A lot of us have already lived through climate disasters, and we're probably going to live through more. And I am thinking a lot about what is possible. What does Boulder look like? And after we've met our 2050 climate goals, I'll be 75 in 2050. And I think there's probably some 75-year-olds in this room, right? What is my life going to be like? What's my world like when I wake up on my 75th birthday in 25 years on Tuesday? I'll be, what's my day going to be like? Am I coming here for an event? Is this building going to be here? How will I get there? Will I have public transportation? Will we finally have rail? And so I think a lot about, reframing this question is like, what are our hopes, dreams, and fears? And then, a lot of things that we want for ourselves is not changing physics. The things that we want for ourselves and our communities and our children, are possible, but I think it takes some creativity and also suspending our judgment. I live in a neighborhood right now in the Newlands with some friends, and it's the most dense neighborhood I've ever lived in. And I had to adjust to that. I had been living in the suburbs of South Boulder. And so I have ADUs in the neighborhood. And it's funny, it's one of the most wealthiest neighborhoods in Boulder. And it's such a different flavor. And of course, the people who live there love it. And, I don't know if it's not going to be my home forever, because I'm going to hopefully win the affordable housing lottery this month and have my own place in Boulder. So that's exciting. Like I said, all this is very personal. So I'm at 5 minutes and 30 seconds. And so just reframing for what we, being able to talk about our hopes, dreams, and fears.
Okay. All right. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for being here. Great to see all your bright faces. I hope I can share some perspective on this. I think broadly, the message at the end was pretty clear, right? Like from an environmental perspective, density is better, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious. I have to say, I have very mixed feelings about that video. I thought it was kind of basically, pushing like, oh, that old way of doing things, right? Like creating this false dichotomy. I don't know anybody in the environmental movement that I've talked to that that liked suburban sprawl. We never thought that was a good idea. So why do you have to create a bad guy to get your point across? That seems to me, it just adds to the conflict. And that's one of the central problems we face in our society today. So I had really mixed feelings about the video. I get it. She has a message. She's trying to get elected. She's, pushing this agenda of more dense housing in Virginia or wherever she's from. So it felt to me like it was a little bit of a self-promotional video, kind of creating an artificial bad guy that you could then sell yourself against as a good person with the answer. Fine, I get it. So
it came out of World War II, the suburban, the sprawl. So it was a good.
Speak out, please. Take the microphone.
It's your 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
I don't think they might.
No, I was just saying I learned in school around like environmental studies that the suburban sprawl came out of World War II, and it was seen as a good thing and a positive thing for communities and neighborhoods and having the space. And it really didn't get. I feel like it in 2005 is when we started to really be like, oh, I can't walk to get a jug of milk. It's in Highlands Ranch, and it's changed a lot of the dynamics of neighboring as a verb, which Wendell Berry has talked about. And, I think that's one of those like tensions.
So, yeah, I mean, we've to some degree destroyed our communities by doing the suburban sprawl issue, right? Like where I grew up in Pennsylvania, it was all villages, and every village had a bar, restaurant, hotel kind of place, and that's where people would gather. And, you see culturally that's had a difficult effect for us, and we've largely kind of ignored it. So I agree. I just felt it was a little bit like just a false dichotomy. So the whole greens versus gray thing. So, and I'm not a housing expert. That's not really my domain. I do think we've kind of ignored the whole population issue. Like it was like there and huge and in front of us and Paul Ehrlich, and now almost nobody talks about it, right? As it's talked about today, which is probably true, is that we basically have a demographic problem. And no one has more of a demographic problem than China, who has, really pushed on sort of anti-population growth and all the terrible stories of things that happened. But now they have a real demographic problem with a lot of older people and not too many, not enough young people. And we have that to a lesser degree in the United States. Germany has similar challenges coming up, and those are going to drive a lot of dynamics in their cultures and economy going forward. So that was kind of my first response on your question, which was I felt it was unnecessarily a false dichotomy.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because that was a little bit intentional. We well, I think the video is good in kind of laying out the issue, but it's a black white issue, and I'm going to jump a little bit because it's actually our third question, and I want to throw it out here now, so when we break into groups, we're thinking about all three of these issues. But the first way is this video an effective way, to define the perspectives. And as you point out, it's a bit simplistic, and it does the same thing as always. It creates a bad guy. Now they're bad and they're good. That might be quite effective. Well,
why do we have to create?
It's effective, and here's, I'm going to read question 3 or issue 3. The voters elect the policymakers in most cities. And simple is often better for a campaign message to be effective. We just say, you either this or that. Good, bad. Black, white. Green, gray. Dichotomies are two-dimensional when many issues are 3 or more dimensional issues. And simplification can also magnify conflict. It's often designed for that. It's to get you stirred up. Even though there may be significant areas of agreement, and that's really what we're trying to get to tonight, better comprehension of the complexity of the issues can actually improve decision-making amongst those that are elected, our elected officials, the people that represent us. So this appears to set up like a conflict. I mean, yeah, we're always setting up these conflicts, and it doesn't really reflect reality. It doesn't reflect reality on the ground, and supporting or opposing doesn't always get us to where we want to get, and they don't always get us the results we want to get. We get kind of locked into our boxes, and we're not hearing the other side, and we're not realizing what we're doing, and we're being smarter than the other person, and we're formulating our responses. So how can we depoliticize and optimize the conversations? Call Steffi over to help us talk to each other, and here at the local level, because if you're paying attention nationally, there's a firefight raging. And it's all about good and bad. You're either with us or you're evil and depraved. And that is not an effective way to run a city. And what we're trying to do at the most local level we can is get the best people into office that set the policy, that guide us forward to get us to, where are we going to be in 2075? I know where I'll be. I'll be worm food. But our grandkids are going to be here, and what's it going to look like for them, and what are they going to think about us? So that's kind of the final closing theme. So I'm going to wind that in, and what I want to do now, and I'm going to ask our experts to be available for questions if you want to ask them something from their area of expertise. But let's break up. I think 4 or 5 groups should be good. If somebody wants to go out on the patio, I block that off so it may be a little bit more comfortable to find the space. But let's break up into 5 groups. I need some group captains. Who wants to captain a group? Everyone raise your hands at once. Yeah, go ahead.
As you interpret the video, instead of what's wrong with it or what's right with it, why don't you ask, what information do you need? What more information do you need? Do you see what I'm saying? Try not to get locked into the either or like you were talking about. What information could you take with you? What do you need more information about? What do you need to understand more? And try to operate within the realms rather than the either or. Does that make sense? It's easier to go to either or. It's always easier. So we're throwing down the challenge.
All right, I'm going to ask the SOSSAS folks in the room. Raise your hands if you've been involved with SOSSAS. I would ask for you all to volunteer to run some groups. All right. Sorry to volunteer you, but I need some groups to form. So it's going to be 8 to 10 people in each group, probably. All right. Mike's going to do one. Dick's going to do one. Steffi's going to do one. Is everyone comfortable staying in here, or do you want to move out? One group want to go on the patio. You're welcome to. All right. This is awesome. The conversation did get going. Now it's hard to slow it down, but that's ideal. We can go on longer than planned for sure, but I'd like to leave about 15 minutes here at the end to kind of get some conclusions, hear from everybody where they are, and allow for a little bit of Q&A if you want to go there. And then if people need to leave, they can leave. And I know I need to get Tom a beer if he wants one. But let's get back together. I'm gonna bust down this last group in the back. All right. Corner group. Chan Hut. All right. Thanks for playing along. First of all, did you all find calling out the black and the white of the video, the gray and the green of the video, useful to try to not fall into that trap in your conversations? Was that at all helpful? So kind of reframing. I know that I've had these conversations with Mike as well, in terms of it's not really constructive. It really isn't constructive, because there are pieces of truth and goodness in a lot of people's different perspectives, and just trying to find. So let's start with each group just real quick. Were you able to find common ground on some issues?
Yes.
This group was? Yes. Yes. Back group? Yes. Outside group? You never found any common ground. You did find some common ground?
Something needs to be done.
Somebody should fix the problem. That's awesome.
Ways to go at solving it. So yeah, I think there was a big agreement. There's this remaining question.
Okay, so I'm going to say that in terms of common ground, yes, every group was able to at least not fight each other too vigorously. What were a couple, and this is not to, I don't want you all to debate the issue itself, because the issue itself is too big, but the process, the lesson itself, what were common areas of agreement? I'll start with you guys. What did you agree on?
It's more complex than, the issue is more complex than just green and gray. There are legal issues, there are big, there's the ownership issue. Should we have apartments or condos? What are some of the others that we just, the aging population,
the idea of developing neighborhoods.
Yes.
And communities instead of just complexes.
Yes, developing neighborhoods, not complexes. Not having, what'd you say, corporations buy their way out of the regulations, or yeah. And of course the problem of our youth. What, they can't afford.
Affordability for the kids.
Correct.
Future generations.
Correct.
And changing the rules, revamping the.
Okay. I'm going to give, who's speaking for your group? Steffi's doing it?
I think we have similar issues, that it's more complex. There's legal issues. There's community issues around laws and statutes that are complex. There generational issues about what we talked about, generational wealth. So the affordability and what generational wealth has provided for many generations, what it has enabled them to do. But I think we are, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I heard those comments also in our conversations in varying forms. Anything I left out? If you think of it, jump.
All right. Who's got? Thank you. All right, Shaquille. Ready to do? You want to do it?
No, God, no.
All right.
We also talked. We also talked a lot about the complexity and the idea that you can't just solve an issue. You have to solve a system of issues altogether. Particularly, we talked about the relationship between housing and transportation and how one of those, like, you can't do one of these things, you have to do many of these things. Related to that, I think an issue we talked about that isn't on there right now is the hardness of solving these problems. We talked a lot about the many challenges and how it's not obvious how you do any one of these things, but we also, I think, agreed that all of these things do have to be done. Like, we got to find a way to find a way to solutions.
Okay, and then someone from the corner group, but you're going to have to move.
Can I add to our group real quick, or what I heard?
Yes, you may.
I also heard kind of at the end of our conversations, and maybe it was in my head, but just recognizing like people had different needs when they were younger, when they had children, and as they age, and what our values are and needs, and that, you know, is reflected in the environment we live in.
Okay, corner group.
I'm Mike. I was back in the corner group, and in transparency, I am a developer, and so I'm bringing. I know, but see, that's what we get. We're evil developers. So I think we were in agreement that we need to have deeper discussions. Shaquille brought this up a little bit. We need to go deeper, have more dialogue around these complex issues. And out of that, we need to aggregate something that we might refer to as collective wisdom or wisdom of the crowd that reflects the values, the goals of the neighborhoods that are impacted, as well as the values and goals of unrepresented stakeholders. We might have unborn populations. We might have aging populations that aren't participating because they're in senior homes. But I think a big point that came up too that I think we agreed on is that within the process and the context of the city, it is harder to do better white hat development that is complex and walkable, bikeable communities that solve multiple problems, and is much easier to do profit-driven, single-purpose developments like the big apartments that everybody hates. So we need to find a way to make it easier for developers to do good work, harder for the monolithic work to be done. Anything else?
All right. So, and now we're going to go, and I don't want to get this. This is dangerous, but I'm going to ask anyways. One or two areas of disagreement where there's obviously going to take some more time.
Okay. I'll go first. So not necessarily a group came up with the fact that there were some issues that were not brought up in the film, such as money. The role that money plays in motivating how projects are developed, and the actors and stakeholders that are behind that, and the issues of money. Do people want to invest in the community, or do they want to not invest in the community? Do they want to pay taxes towards building better places, or
not pay more taxes. Just money needs to be central, and those personal issues that come up, like, or aging, demographic, where do they find the service workers that allow them to age in place?
Residents' best interests in mind.
Yes, you may say that, definitely. It's a spectrum, but it's sort of like, thank you. Okay, let me pass it to another group.
I think I would say in general, we actually agreed about almost everything. The one thing that I thought was an interesting place of disagreement was what we thought our personal ideal solution looked like was different for all of us. And I think Sarah Dawn at the end raised an interesting point, which was part of that reflected that all of us in this group are in different phases of life. And so partially we're seeing this from a different perspective because we're just in different places in our life right now.
So everyone has a different goal or a way they want to live it.
Yeah.
Well, I think, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. All right. Group 3, group 1, you're group 1, group 1, go.
What's the question?
Disagreement?
Running for disagreement.
Did we have any disagreements? We didn't get to disagreements. We were still talking about agreements.
We don't need to try harder.
I know. Give us more time.
Wait. I don't know if it was a disagreement, but I brought up the fact is there some other way that we're not thinking of in the sense of we talked about sprawl versus up, but is there some other way?
Outside the box. Outside the box, yeah. We would have gotten to some. I mean, we just needed another couple minutes. Yeah. Sure, we just got to start. I don't think so.
All right. Last group. Group number 2.
Oh. What I'm gonna. What did you guys see as disagreements? So pretty much what other groups have said.
Growing older, we grew up with lots of space for others. We're not used to density.
But we have someone younger that wants a farm. And so why is that appealing to you?
I just want it to be.
I think it's just a general distaste of humanity right now. So yeah, it's sad, but it's true. It's
Okay. Jamming all this into 2 hours obviously is a challenge, but we have 2 experts up here, and I know that there could be some additional questions. But I'm gonna let them first of all kind of react if they want to what they're hearing, and then anyone that wants to stick around, as long as they're willing to stick around, you can fire some questions off. Is that cool with y'all? Yeah. All right.
We'll let the professor start.
Yeah, in our group, I was giving them economics lesson, and I was like, oh, that's probably a bad idea. But when the developers come in, don't let them get away with their negative externalities, right? Development has negative impacts on the community. And I think the laws, because we talked about, you need to change the laws. And I'll tell you a story. I grew up in Pennsylvania on a dairy farm. And when I grew up, it was very rural, and now it's all suburbia, right? And all these developments are coming in, and my brother and I hate it. And we're also close enough to Route 78 and Route 22 that area is a big issue, big development area for warehouses. And these are warehouses that have massive trucks and stuff like that. And noise and light pollution, and everybody hates them, rightfully so, because they create negative impacts on the community, big negative impacts. So we're trying to fight them in the township. And it's very difficult because the laws I was just at a meeting last week, 5 people representing the development company to build a warehouse, worth all this money. And people are standing up and saying, we don't want this. We don't want this. The Township Board of Supervisors turned it down. But the story's not over. Why is the story not over? Because it's just a legal battle. And they don't care. They don't really care. They'll try to work with you, but they don't care about the negative effects. And guess what the township said? Well, we're working on some changes to the ordinances where this can't happen, but it may go through because they may win the legal battle, right? So get on top of it. Make these changes now before it gets bad. That doesn't mean no development changes. We like density, but maybe we want to make sure it's done right and that the developers pay their full way. And the time for action on that is yesterday, not tomorrow. So, okay. All right. Okay.
You want to say anything?
I can.
You don't have to. Don't come at you.
Like, come at me.
I know that those of you who know me know that this is a different role for me because I like to be in the fray, and my role tonight is to moderate. So you haven't heard, I'm not expressing opinions. I'm trying to suss it all out. Kind of like when I'm a chair of a board, I'm trying to do the same thing. When I'm on the board, I'm going to dig in and try to convince you. But my role today is different. I would just say that there are a lot of different alternatives, and I just wanted to respond to that because I spent half my life until I was well into my 30s and declared Longmont my hometown, living in other cities and living in very small towns, villages. So I've lived in villages of 500 people, and they're like Tom talked about. They're compact, and if you live in Italy or in Germany, the land use laws are quite strict, and they generally don't sprawl. Why? Because they don't have an unlimited resource of land like we do. So the United States has developed very, very differently over time as a automobile-driven nation. And I've spent a lot of years living in small towns and very large cities. I lived in the largest city in the world, Tokyo, for 4 years. So I've lived there, and I've lived in a variety, but the land use laws there are quite different, and the development is compact. It's generally quite compact so that the amenities are available. The store is walkable and bikeable. Everything is the quality of life there doesn't require you to drive to actually thrive. So that's a perspective that if you want to talk about other perspectives, that's a perspective that I grew up with. And I love Longmont, and I see Longmont as blessed with a plethora of gifts, but we will lose it if we don't have smarter leadership. My plea is not to tell you what that should be, but we really need to have more complex conversations because this yes-no business is getting us nowhere. All right. Questions, comments. You have to come up here and talk into the mic. That's the only bad thing, but that's a good thing.
Should I face? Well, the question's to you, actually, Tom. Because I'm also curious of Mike's comment of how do we encourage the right development and discourage the wrong development. And I think also historically, towns used to be incremental, very small. You had mom and pop shops actually developing, or you had, your small homeowner that then built another house in the backyard or next to them. So how do we encourage that versus this large scale thing that they are kind of being negative about? So.
Can I start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Tom's going to think about his answer, but I read a lot of things. I'm still actively engaged with the community who looks at urban resiliency and development. We read a lot of case studies, a lot of reports, and I'm thankful for the city leadership who is staying in the conversation. And there's a lot of people researching the impacts of our decisions. And I think one of the things that, especially in academia, we sometimes find out we were wrong, right? Or we find out what those externalities are and what they mean, especially beyond a spreadsheet. And we don't have to guess. There is a lot of research out there and a lot of really smart, passionate people. I am worried about access to this data. A lot of it is becoming compromised by some of the national funding being retracted. But what I'm seeing is a lot of reports. So this isn't just a Longmont problem or your village problem. And so we have a lot of places we can learn, and sharing that, journals, articles, short films, these personal anecdotes that we have, but there's a lot of information out there about how things are working, and then also making recommendations for and proposals. So we don't have to make it up. We don't have to guess is one of my answers to that question. Taylor, right? Yeah.
Thank you. That was better than the answer I had. I'm not a housing expert, so the specifics of it, right? I think there's lots of research. There's experts that have more knowledge on that than I do. So that said, I guess it's to some degree a political question, right? Like you need the right leaders, and you need to elect the right people, and then get them to do. Hopefully, they're going to do good work in the broader community's interest and not be in the pockets of some of the developers or things like that. So watch the politics. I think that's helpful. And then generally, I think the whole message of that video was density. There's some benefits of density. If I see a theme here tonight, there is benefits of density. And I grew up on a farm too, so I'd rather live on a farm, but I get it. But you also need people to buy the places. So in Boulder, they seem to be making the trade-off to live in basically a square box with lots of condos and apartments in it, just so they can be in Boulder. Because all the development I see in Boulder is 4-story apartment or condo complexes. So all they can afford. And I guess it's less costly in the end, and it's better for the environment. But you don't get land. It's hard to get land around here.
One of the things I want to throw into the conversation is one of the main threads of SOSSAS is the ideas that we as a community have the power to have more power to make the change rather than turning to outside government. And I know government is necessary in many ways, and all of the stuff about government, I'm going to put over here in a parking lot. But I want you to think of one of the things I've loved about SOSSAS is what Mike has taught me is that there's not enough money in the world to solve all our problems, but there's human capital and ideas and imagination and thinking outside the box. And the abundance of that in this room or within a community or within all the journal articles where people are diving into this topic can provide impetus that we can be the change rather than turning to the outside forces. Now, I don't want to over-idealize that. There's a tendency that we do over-idealize the possibilities. But I would want to reinforce with you, we have a lot of power that we give away thinking that it has to be solved somewhere else. And again, don't minimize the cost, don't minimize anything that you've said, but maybe we need to change the paradigm and say, we have the solutions. Our communities have solutions, and we need to go to those meetings and speak our minds and speak up and become informed. Because I know myself, I oftentimes find myself relegated to, I don't want to go to another meeting. Let somebody else do that. And sometimes I have to step in and say, well, if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to go with Sarah Dawn and go to her meeting because she knows more than I do, and maybe I can lend support. So there are those ways that we can, and sometimes life gets in my way of me stepping in because I feel powerless. But your conversations make me feel that I have some power that I could share with you and both of you. I think that's, I'm just going to throw the SOSSAS piece into that conversation. I hope that made some sense.
All right. Before we switch to the last slide, if you're interested in any of the references, these things all have informed kind of the way they're informing my thinking, and other people have suggested some of these to me as well. But you live in Longmont, you should be familiar with Envision Longmont, because that kind of that's a strategic roadmap and that was 12,000 people across our community participated in developing that plan. So for our leadership to call it a silly plan or to say it's not the Bible, to me is a bit offensive as one of the 12,000 people that participated in the development of that plan. So we need leadership that agrees we have a plan. If we need to tweak the plan. The fact that they're discovering that, oh, maybe we need to update it. Well, yeah, if you read the plan, there's a provision in there that twice a year revisions can happen to that plan, but we don't seem to be taking advantage of that. So it's not morphing with reality. Land use in Colorado is an interesting thing. You want to learn about complex systems. There's 5 different state agencies that worked on that land use report, and it talks across a wide range of subjects from public health to wildlife, to land use, to water, to housing, DOLA. I mean, that's an interesting one. And then there's some books that I've read recently that all of these books were recommended to me by other people. So they'll open your mind a little bit. Especially Think Again will certainly open your mind. Where the Water Goes, anyone that lives in Colorado should read that book. Anybody that lives in Colorado should read that book. My I'm not going to say future son-in-law, but my youngest daughter's partner recommended. He works in the city water treatment plant on the inbound side. So, and we're using water that would otherwise flow to the Gulf of California, and it's very, very interesting. Other questions, comments? It's late. If you need to leave, leave. But if you want to stay here and talk, like who's got another question or comment or whatever, I'm happy to stick around. And I'm gonna get Tom a beer if he wants one. Oh, you got one. All right. So good. Set.
I just want to add a book. There's a book called Sapiens by Noah Yuval Harari.
Harari, yeah.
Yeah. Sapiens, like Homo sapiens without the homo. And it's just, I think it's a phenomenal big picture perspective on where we've come as a species and how we got here, and the humans, all the stuff we just make up for us to work better. And a lot of things we've made up have served us well in the past, and they're no longer serving us. And we need to make new versions of those. So, and then I'm a business school guy, so I think great environmentalism is great capitalism, and great capitalism is great environmentalism. But the capitalism we have right now is definitely not great environmentalism. So I'm in we need to nudge it. We don't need to throw it out.
In my closing thoughts, something we really didn't talk about is some of the assumptions we're making about the future. And one of the things that I think a lot about is the young people I work with is preparing them for more climate disasters, which they're likely to face in their lifetime. Violence. I've been connected to, or 1 degree separated from, a lot of the violent acts in Colorado. I've been learning more about climate resiliency. I've been learning more about the isolation and the loneliness that people are feeling. And so how we build our communities and how we live in them is going to look different. There's going to be wild cards or black swans and we the geopolitics access to materials and minerals, and a lot of what we have, it requires violent subjugation of people to get it. And so I think that those connections also really complicate this, what we're trying to build and do, and that it's based on some assumptions. And so how do we take care of each other and the planet is, I think, one of my guiding thoughts for any of this development.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for taking time out of your day to be here and have the conversation. Share some of these concepts and thoughts and discoveries with your friends, your circles, your families, your antagonists. We think that a deeper understanding of complex and not always intuitive systems help us build more sustainable and affordable communities by tailoring our rules and processes to our collective vision. So it's not easy, and it requires us to all study and to lean in and go to council when you're tired and you don't want to go to council, and go to P&Z and do all that stuff.
I live in Arvada. I don't know anything like this that's going around Arvada. So you are very inspiring. I really appreciate your hearts.
And thank you, Eric, for bringing us together.
Yes.
And thanks to Mike and Carol for bringing us together as well. And thank you for elected officials and potential future elected officials for being here to participate in this, because we need engaged leadership.
Thank